Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thank you for coming. My name's Amy Draves, and I'm here to introduce Nassim Taleb, who's joining us as part of the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. Nassim is here today to discuss his book, Antifragile.
The microphone.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, it's working.
I can hear myself really well. Okay, I'll lean in, thank you. Nassim is here today to discuss his book, Antifragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. Antifragile refers to something that is unbreakable, but not because it is impervious to assault. Antifragility allows an entity to withstand all the black swans coming its way and to absorb their forceful volatility and emerge stronger for it. Nassim Taleb is a former trader and is a distinguished professor of risk engineering at New York University's Polytechnic Institute. His work focuses on decision-making under uncertainty, as well as technical and philosophical problems with probability and meta-probability. As you no doubt know, he is also the author of The Black Swan. Please join me in giving him a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Anyway, so let me talk about fragility. You guys are techies, no? So let's be techie. Forget about the usual waste of time talking about candles and this and metaphors and packages and stuff. This is all in the book. Let's talk about fragility. Let's define fragility. Okay. Unfortunately, this is not porcelain, so we can do an experiment to try to break it. But the fragile is what doesn't like volatility. It has this payoff. Small gains or no gains, okay, over time. This is time. And big losses. So harm exceeds gains. Think of a bank portfolio. You make small, and then you have big losses, like short an option. I was an option trader for 20 years, and we view the world in two kind of packages. One that loses from volatility, this one, and one that gains from volatility, opposite payoff. Now this is the exact payoff over time, in time series. So this is time. Okay, and on the vertical, it's payoff. Small gains, big harm. As you can see, this applies also to medicine. If you go to see a doctor who gives you some random medication, small gain, big potential harm at some point in the future. That's the payoff of short volatility. If you look at a coffee cup at a table, imagine it's not, it's in something that breaks, breakable material. It wants peace and predictability. So you can map fragility as something that doesn't like volatility. Don't hesitate to ask me questions during my conversation, you see. So this is an interesting techie way to view things, because from this is in time-space, we can have an even better definition of fragility and a way to detect fragility as follows. In my chapter, I ask people not to read the chapter 18 and 19, or actually not to read it, meaning they're going to read it if they're intelligent. That's sort of when you tell someone not to read it, you know what happens. In it, size of stone, this is harm. Harm or positive. Harm is a negative, okay? Gain is in a positive, right? Like here, gain and losses. There's a story in the Talmud of a king who had a son who committed whatever violation. Can you hear? Raise your hand when you can't hear me, all right? Or if you want to interrupt to say something aggressive, it's okay as well, all right? So the son committed the violation. The king has to punish the son. Big dilemma. I don't know if you've been either king or had a son who committed a violation, had to punish him with a big stone, but it's a very difficult situation. How can you solve it? The king had an advisor who was very shrewd. He told him, okay, you break that big stone in small little pebbles, okay? And you pelt them. And what happens? The son is not going to be harmed. So it's very simple. This is stone, and this is harm. you have acceleration, you see. A 10-pound stone is more than 10 times more harmful, all right, than a 1-pound stone. With this, you get a definition of fragility that gives you that. So this is a read book, all right? 550 pages of, you know, we're going to get into this, but I'm giving you the gist. You go straight to the core of the problem. This is what it is, you see? Accelerated harm. Take your body, or anything that has survived has to have non-linear harm. If harm were linear, it'd be like this. You see, this is linear. This is concave. For extreme events, you're harmed a lot more when you're concave than when you're linear. Let me explain. You know, if you jump 10 meters, definitely, even in Microsoft, people die. No, I'm not sure people die in Microsoft. I don't know if that happened, but I'm sure. I mean, but it's possible that people die. You know, outside of Microsoft, people die 10 meters fall, they die. But now, think about if you fall 10 times from 1 meter, what would happen to you? Nothing. It's just people laugh, right? Now, 1,000 times 1 millimeter, nothing. If harm were linear, the cumulative harm from small steps, you see, would kill you just going to the office, because 1/100th of a millimeter, okay, you get that, you know, this impact would kill you, you see. So you realize, now we have a definition of fragility. I still didn't get to antifragility. But once you have a definition of fragility, you understand how to map it mathematically, how to define it, how to measure it, and how to use it. Let's think of size. Projects, 100 million pound projects, have a lot more cost overruns in the UK, 30% more than 5 million pound projects. So we have diseconomies of scale from random shocks. This explains why elephants break a leg very easily, and you don't have as many elephants as mice, even if you weigh them by the weight. The real explanation is probabilistic, is that you have the distribution of the small harm is vastly higher. First, let's take earthquakes, all right? If you weren't, you have to be concave to earthquakes. Incidentally, I went to a bathroom and sometimes say what to do in case of earthquake. This you've never seen in New York. So I thought of it, you know, coming to this lecture, that you probably have had 8 earthquakes since I've been speaking. Very small scale, you see? So there are probably 3 million earthquakes, small, micro, every day in the world, all right? Every day. But so if we were linear to earthquakes, would be gone. You see the idea? So you have to be nonlinear, whatever has survived. So this is sort of like the idea. I have 450 pages of math on the web and a technical document that comes with this to back up these things with theorems and stuff like that, all right? But that's the main idea of fragility. Once you map it, as I said, now let's talk about antifragile, all right? The antifragile is convex to a stressor. Has to have this shape with respect to a stressor. Not concave, convex. You like variability if you're convex to any stressor. Say thermal variability. What is the perfect temperature here? 70 degrees? You do better if your linear combination of 80 degrees and 60 degrees. Or even better, 50 and 90. Even better, 40 and 100. You see? For the same average. It means if you like variability, it means that you love randomness. You're going to have the opposite payoff. And this is convex, this is concave. I'm being techie because you guys are techies, but tell me if it's too complicated, then we can go back to what I'm going to say tonight at, you know, talking to retired readers, you know, metaphors about packages that break and stuff like that. But I'd rather, you know, I'm much more relaxed, you know, talking about things, and that's how I do things in life, you see. And then later on translate them into, package them into metaphors. So, with this, we can classify the world in 3 categories: fragile, robust, antifragile. The robust is not the opposite of fragile, visibly, because the robust has a very simple definition. The fragile, the upper bound is unharmed. The lower bound is harmed. The robust, the upper bound and lower bound are unharmed. The anti-fragile, only the lower bound is unharmed. You're open to the upside. Okay? So doing this for a system, for any package, now we have an exact definition of fragile and anti-fragile. And we can map things biologically that the anti-fragile loves variation. It also maps from this. We have 3 maps, as I showed you. One, 2 maps so far. One in time space and one in functional space. Yes?
Is anti-fragile same as convex?
Well, no, convex, convex is a way, if you're convex with respect to a source of randomness or source of variation, you're anti-fragile so long as you're convex to it.
I mean, if you shifted that down so that at 60 degrees, let's say that there was actually some harm.
Then you would be like this. You could be like this, all right? You'd be convex and then concave, you see? You'd be convex, concave. You can have all kinds of shapes. Or it could be flat, or it could be even concave, you see? In fact, we all, for temperature, have this shape. This is the temperature. You're like this. All right? Let me explain. If you spend 140 degrees, 70, 0 degrees, all right? If your grandmother spends, I have a chapter that I talk about grandmothers. If you spend one day at 0 degree, the other day at 140 degrees for an average of 70 degrees, you're not going to have a grandmother. You agree? But within some small thing, you're better off having some variation. You see, so everything is convex with respect to a source of randomness and up to a level, up to some degree. For example, let's talk about the body. Weightlifting, you do a lot better lifting once 100 pounds than 10,000 times a millionth of whatever, thousandths of a, 1/10,000th of a pound. You get the idea, right? You do better. But visibly, if I lift, or someone puts on my shoulder 5,000 pounds, you know what's going to happen to me? I'll be transformed into what? Into corned beef, So you see the idea, up to some degree of randomness. So now that we have this idea, now that we have the graphs, I'm relaxed, it's very easy. I'm not making an effort anymore, unlike what I went through during my book tour. I can talk about my book and refer to these, all right? Now there's actually a third dimension, what I call the probabilistic distribution of things, why everything anti-fragile loves randomness, that I'll map later. So now let me start the regular presentation of the book, okay? So this book is about this quality that people forget in a discourse called anti-fragile because they have a wrong definition of fragility. But in fact, the ancients understood it very well. And anti-fragile is whatever gains from, I call them the disorder brothers. Randomness, variability, stressors, chaos, volatility, and similar structures. I learned about that when I was an option trader, and we had something called long gamma. Long gamma means if there's big market variation or turmoil, you make some money. Up to a point, of course, all right? You may make money up to 10% crash, but not up to 30%. Or it could be what we call open-ended long gamma. You make all the way, all right? So we had these structures, and I was trained in thinking in these terms and map them. So that was my profession. But couldn't communicate with people, you see? I didn't realize my definition of fragility in finance, which was very simply, if you're harmed more by 5% move than 5 times a 1% move, you are fragile, okay? I didn't realize it was so universal definition of fragility. I didn't realize till I started thinking that effectively the Romans have a word for something that likes volatility. It's called hormesis. I mean, not the Romans, the medical profession has a word for it. Hormesis, they have 2 things. They have something for what people call resilience, called mithridatization. You take a little bit of poison every day, and you're going to be immune for that problem. You're not going to be better off, but immune against that source of randomness. And actually in here, there's the mother of Nero kept taking, the thing. But the problem is, as you well know, you could be anti-fragile or you can gain immunity by taking drugs, but you can't do it, with respect to other sources of harm, namely swords. So her son wanted to kill her in the end. He sent someone to kill her with a sword. So which could be poison. So there's misreliatization, and the other category is hormesis. Hormesis when your overall system gets better from a little bit of poison or a little bit of a shock. So I thought about it, I said, now there's something that I can map mathematically, and there's a mechanism of overcompensation at work, like mechanism of redundancy. Just think of the way, even at Microsoft, people come with 2 kidneys, no? No? You have 2 kidneys. Why do you have 2 kidneys? You have redundancy against random events. Because when you have redundancy, you don't have to understand the future as well. If you have 2 kidneys, you don't have to be as precise in understanding the future as someone who has, only one. So, and there's 7 or 8 ways you can lose a kidney. From trauma, lead poisoning, your cousin hitting you, wild animal, to other things. You don't have to understand the environment as much, okay? Well, it turns out that there's also redundancy in the way we have strengths. If I lift 100 pounds, my body won't adjust to lifting 100 pounds. It will project an extra 20 pounds, and it will code, like you guys do coding, it will code for 20 more pounds of muscle over time, or 20 more pounds of lifting. You get the idea? And that is a form of redundancy. It's overshooting to the future. You see the idea. So I realized that in my business of risk manager, effectively, there's no better than nature. It does things in a certain way that is extremely, after 3 billion years, we can give us some credit. And as statisticians, there's no more respectable than an N that large, all right? So this is how I started developing the idea. Then I realized, hey, you know what? We're very bad at predicting in socioeconomic variables. We can put a man on the moon, all right? But even Microsoft can't forecast at what price the market is going to close tomorrow. These complex variables, and we're getting far away from that. So you have to focus, instead of predicting, and all these methods of predicting, on being robust or perhaps antifragile. Gain from randomness, gain from errors, and try to identify what gains from randomness and gain from error. So this is a book. Now, you map it to everything. But I wrote this book in a way to prevent any reviewer from being able to skim it. You see? And so far, no reviewer got these points. See what I'm talking about? This is the core. I started the book with this. No reviewer got them, except for one, all right? It's a technical book, visibly dressed in easy language, but if you're a mathematician or you're a scientist, you get it right away. You see, and then they're starting to get it right away, all right? But people are professional reviewers, they completely lost in it. And I make sure that, let me give you the chapter titles if you want to be amused, to realize why reviewers are never going to get it. Like after the prologue, where the idea is clear in the prologue, history written by the losers. Never marry the rock star. Tell them I love some randomness. The souk and the office building, all right? Time and fragility, the philosopher's stone and its inverse. So I mean, they're not going to be able to pick it up, all right? So it's, the other books are written exactly the same style, by the way. The other 2 books, and it worked. So you bypass the middleman, the reviewer, and you go straight to the consumers, okay? So this is the book. So it's composed of 7 different books, 7 different topics that apply this. First topic, the most interesting one, is on evolution. Evolution is long randomness. Think about it. If you have 10 offspring, you're never going to have improvement of the species if you don't have some randomness in the environment that that differentiate between them. You agree? And then also genetic drift, some randomness along the line. You see? So evolution likes randomness. It's a problem. Why is it a problem? Well, because since the Enlightenment, we have some social justice. Can you reconcile? Of course we can reconcile. And that's sort of the challenge I take in my book 1. Where entrepreneurs, and here you're in the tech business, entrepreneurs, really, the system improves thanks to the failure of entrepreneurs. And then I learned something in biology from a gentleman who, you remember hormesis, system gets stronger? He discovered one thing, that no, system doesn't get stronger. Some parts of the business under a shock, the weak parts get cleaned up in you. The restaurant business, as a business is composed of restaurants. So layer restaurant business. The restaurants are fragile for the business to work well, to be robust. You agree? Bankruptcies help clean up the system. Therefore, the system becomes robust because the parts are fragile. It's the same thing in your human body. Cells need to be fragile for you to experience hormesis, improvement. Because when you starve yourself, weak cells go first. And then within cells, protein. He modeled it, Antoine Danchin, published a paper in Genes. If you go to my website, I have all these papers linked to this concept. So realize evolution loves volatility. Okay? And this is rarely mapped like this. So in this representation, so I had to do some work, some mathematical work on that. So this is the book one, but of course it's written in poetic level. What kills me makes others stronger. You see, and then why do you have the difference? But you know that since the Enlightenment, we talk about I, the individual. Before that, we never. You're collective. The tribe, the collective, you die for the tribe. This is why you have suicide bombers. You know, they don't consider themselves as a unit. But but now we have a modern society, and you're not going to commit harakiri for the sake of the computer industry to get better by failing. So we need the mechanism to make failure acceptable. Well, you seem to give social acceptability to failure, but not in other businesses, certainly not in Japan, and not in Europe. When you fail, you're a loser, you see. So it prevents people from doing these things. So we have to find a mechanism to make people fail to improve the system. That's sort of book one. Book two, I'm going to go through the books, and then during the Q&A, I can answer whatever, divert you into whatever I haven't covered, okay? Book two, I talk about modernity. The problem is, look how smooth these surfaces are, okay? Look how smooth this wall, okay? Nothing is fractal in here. Look outside. You see the green outside? You see how fractal it is? Okay, complete different world, you see? So you're psychologically, we like variation. We like variation. But modernity doesn't know it, wants to make us comfortable. You see? Modernity wants your children on Prozac to iron their mood swings. So the problem is that they don't realize that there's a difference between what I call the cat and washing machine. What's the difference? That the mechanical doesn't need stressors to operate. The organic communicates with the environment via stressors. You see, you have to get stressors, right? This is how the information system. So the problem is if you stabilize everything to make everything comfortable like we have here, what happens to you? You get weaker. Your bones get weaker if you spend time in bed. Your system gets weaker. And we sort of understand it because I'm sure you have a gym here, no? So, but there's a contradiction. You have a gym, I'm sure, and you have elevators. You have a gym, yet you have smooth surfaces. And then you go to the nurse and they give you antibiotics, no? Okay, so you understand very quickly. So there's something about modernity, try to make people comfortable that weakens them. Instead, so I call that interventionism. And the person over-intervening in a system is called fragilista. And typically they fragilize the system twofold. First, by making it too comfortable, it becomes weak. And two, by not being there, intervening when needed. Mr. Greenspan, you've heard of him. Had he inherited the nature, he would have made sure we have 68.7 degrees year-round. You get the idea? He wanted to do the same for the economy. It fragilizes the economy because without stressors, you don't have, you have like flammable material accumulating and risks accumulating on the surface and then blows up. So what you have is very stable, but then blows up rather than something volatile. Volatile things, markets need some volatility because that's the way information is conveyed. You can't stifle information. Take, for example, democracy. It needs volatility. And I compared on the Black Swan, Syria, which you've heard of Syria, and you hear about it now, which has zero political volatility, to Italy, that had a lot of it. And which country do you think is safer? I had a lot of letters saying Syria was safer than Italy. Right? They didn't understand. Okay, Syria had zero, political volatility till we had the volatility. And you get the idea. That was in the Black Swan. And now I'm taking on Saudi Arabia. I mentioned Syria and Saudi Arabia in the Black Swan. And then, of course, Egypt, look what happened. You overstabilize. So this is interventionism, this is modernity. So I go through that. And the problem is you're never there for the big, like in medicine, you're never there for the big things. Now, book 3, I talk about prediction. Forget about it, it's not interesting. And then I introduce Fat Tony. Have Fat Tony, a character who smells fragility and makes a buck with those who, lulled by a false sense of security, making pennies, boom, blow up once in a while. Okay? So this is like Fat Tony, introduce Fat Tony. And then I introduce Seneca by defining, let me redraw the convex for you to see the link. If I have a payoff like this, if I have a payoff like this, I'm here, all right? Oh, sorry, it's convex. Let me make it very convex. This is payoff, this is variation. We're here, the market is here. Okay? If the market goes up $1, I make 2 million. The market goes down $1, same amount, I lose 100,000. I'm convex. Well, more upside than downside. Well, the person who figured it out is Seneca, the Roman philosopher. And he was really Roman. They hated intellect. They liked practical things. And he was the wealthiest man in the world at the time. And he figured out that you're harmed, you see, when you're very wealthy because you have more downside than upside. You're fragile. And every morning he would wake up, try to convince himself that he's very poor. Once in a while, like fakes a shipwreck. And then, oh, I discovered all this wealth. So he wanted to make sure that if he loses all his money, which happened at the time, he wouldn't be harmed, you see, because he, you know, so that's sort of like the idea. And so I have a discussion of Seneca, who to me is probably the greatest thinker. Academics never got it because academics think that Stoics are people who have no emotion. In fact, he didn't want to have negative emotion, more upside than downside. And I define antifragility as more upside than downside. Something you may like now, my central chapter, I just put on the web today a distillation of that. My central book is on discovery, tinkering as compared to rational top-down. Tinkering is like optionality, how it likes, you know, bottom-up tinkering. You have little to lose, a lot to gain, all right? As a process, we show that the evidence that a lot of things we think came from science, in fact, came from heuristics of practice. And I do a random simulation. Today is an article on Edge, all right, where I have that simulation. It upset a lot of people, where you show that two brothers, one has knowledge, the other just tinkering, and how much further you can go by tinkering and have more upside than downside, aggressive tinkering, as compared to someone who knows where he's going. That's illogical. And effectively, you look at history of technology, and when you look at definition of technology as defined by Harvard or all these places that it's good to drop out from, as one of your leaders have, you know, they think that technology comes from science. Nonsense. Science comes largely from technology. You see, even in some cases, sometimes you find predecessors, like Euclidean geometry. They were building cathedrals and didn't know how to divide. You know, they probably thought that Euclid was some Greek poet or something. They didn't understand, all right? But then later on, we find matches, you see. Industrial revolution by thinkers. So jet engine, thinkers, engineers knew how to function, and then later on you find a theory. You fit the theory back to the past. I call it lecturing birds how to fly. Upsets academia at all levels when I show formal knowledge versus wild optional knowledge that gains from uncertainty. If you're tinkering, you want maximum exposure to uncertainty. Well, university is a prison, you see. You're a prison of a curriculum, all that nonsense. So, so this is a chapter that really gets university people angry. All right, they like emotionally angry. So particularly statist university system people in the UK, even more from my talk. Yes?
So you're referring to your Edge essay that you put out this morning?
Sorry?
You put out an essay in Edge?
Yes,
yes. I think it's interesting to this group because largely research people in this building.
I see.
By tinkering, you're actually creating a situation where you're able to tinker and take advantage of basically positive black swans.
Exactly. What happens is that there's a theorem that people don't realize, and it's as follows. Is anybody of you here into probability? Okay, any probability distribution that's skewed right. Okay, take the log normal. What's the mean of a log normal? It has a variance in it. So you increase the variance, what happens to the mean? Increases. If you have little to lose and lot to gain, you see, the mean of a distribution that's bounded on the left and open on the right, the mean depends on a variance. In other words, you inject uncertainty in the system, your expected return goes up. The exact opposite of a plane ride. Take a plane ride, you know, I'm going to New York tomorrow. 6 hours? All right. I'm lucky if I make it 5.5 hours. All right. If you inject uncertainty in a system, it's not going to make the plane ride 1 hour. But it can take 2 weeks to get there. You see, September 11 or something. You get the idea, any uncertainty. So the systems that are fragile are defined as their mean degrades when you inject uncertainty, and the mean increases when you inject uncertainty. And that's pretty much the gist of that article. The thing is, when I talk to probability people, they get it right away. That any distribution that's skewed right has a mean, like log normal has mean is 1/2 the sigma square, plus something, all right? So, but when you talk to normal people, it's hard for them to understand why uncertainty is good. So you have to use a lot of patience for that. So this is sort of like the edge essay and my chapter here, which is vastly more aggressive than the edge essay. You see? In my chapter here, I talk about frauds, all right? You know, a lot of things that are frauds, effectively, that anything that compresses uncertainty to channeling it is not very good. And you see, obviously, a lot of situations like the Black-Scholes formula, stuff like that, that were developed in a sophisticated form by operators and later on claimed by professors, you know, as coming from them, because they can't imagine that knowledge can come in any other way. And in it, of course, we have the two tensions. And he who discovered that problem is Nietzsche. You know, you've heard of creative destruction? People assume it's an economist called Schumpeter. How can anything intelligent come out of an academic economist? Impossible. Got to be someone else. That's the rule. If it's attributed to an economist, it has to come from a philosopher, all right? Non-academic, Nietzsche, of course, who was then semi-academic, all right, at the time, creative destruction. And he said that Socrates destroyed the balance between Apollonian, which is reasoning, and Dionysian, which is that deep, dark force in us, because he made it disrespectable to do something you don't understand. He made the unintelligible seem unintelligent. And who's going to debate Socrates? My fat Tony friend. And what is, as you can expect, think of a guy from Brooklyn, all right, who makes his killings squeezing people, debating Socrates. You know who's going to win, all right? Fat Tony wins, all right, by the debate. But it's he has to, you know, abide by philosophical. Yeah, but he Socrates by cross-examining him. So this is sort of my book on innovation, the one I like the most. And I have that distillation of the article, but I go much deeper in here. You know, against the soccer mom, touristification, educational system. We got, you know, there's something about the educational system people don't realize. Do you think that education raises wealth in a country? It raises wealth for a family. It stabilizes income, actually, for a family. It doesn't even raise wealth. Education comes typically, if you take countries that are rich, have a degree of education came after. You see? They get rich, and then suddenly it's epiphenomenal, the thing that is caused by education. Only people who tinker here, like you guys, understand it. But if you go on the East Coast, Harvard Square, put to death right there, you know, for saying something like that. So, book 5, How to Detect Antifragility of Systems. It's measurable.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, go ahead.
So, it seems to me, too, your edge essay and what you just talked about also...
You've read the edge essay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We exchanged some thoughts about on Twitter this morning.
Oh, really? What's your name?
I'm Mr. Griffin.
Ah, okay, very nice guy. Okay. All right, thanks. Yeah.
So, but it seems to me that your essay explains the venture capital industry and its and it's basically power law distribution that
Yeah, I'll get to that during the Q&A about that. Let me, so I can finish this, but okay. He wants me, and I'll answer, you can answer the Q&A as the first question? All right, that it explained, but it explained more than that, the essay. I'm trying to explain more than that. I'm trying to explain how life works. Cooking is heuristic. So we have two approaches. Cooking is I make a hummus, perfect hummus. How do I make perfect hummus? You tinker and then add, because they got nothing to lose by adding an ingredient, giving it to Fat Tony, he says yay or nay, all right? If you say get lost, all right, you dump it, all right? If it, you know, so you have gains. Can you make a hummus out of the chemical, you know, composition? Yes or no? You can't, all right? Okay, the problem is so many things resemble hummus. So if you take in the world what resembles hummus versus what resembles the atomic project, you'd notice it's huge compared to so small. But then we focus on the other ones because science writers make us believe that science plays a larger role. But in fact, what we have is vastly more sophisticated. Technology is more sophisticated than science, you see. We get to venture capital in a minute. So this is my book 4. Book 5, I explain here how you can measure fragility. You know how you can measure fragility? Measure how concave something is. That's it. Take a portfolio or take a company. You have a company, all right? Take a company, increase sales 10%, decrease sales 10%. If the company makes 100 million and loses 500 million, then you're fragile. And that ratio is the exact mapping of fragility. Okay, and you can compare companies that way. You see? Now the problem, someone may tell me, well, you have mistakes in measuring. I say, who cares? I'm second order. If I'm measuring a child and the child is, you see, I'm measuring the child and the child is growing, but my ruler doesn't work, I will still be able to tell how fast he's growing. You see, second order effect. You see, I have, you know, you can get and it's the acceleration that defines fragility. Technical, but it works. I can't measure the future. I can measure fragility of the future, comparative fragilities. Okay. Now, book 6, I call them books because they're independent, and they can be read each on its own. And of course, I go through layers of depth. Every chapter has a topic, and then you go through layers and layers and layers. That's a style. So book 6 is something called Via Negativa. And in it, I talk about medicine. And I model medicine using convexities. It's shocking because, very simply, just as I said, that the human body has to be concave to sources of harm, all right? It has to be treated. Let me give you the intuition. It's a little complicated to do it now, or maybe I don't have a clear idea how to express it in words. But if you're away 1 sigma from the norm, say in hypertension, and nature has dealt with this problem, and no medicine will outperform nature, you see, easily. So someone who's slightly hypertensive has only 1 in 53 chances in benefiting from a drug. You see? You could probably work out, do something, but not, okay, so this is what, but when you're very hypertensive, okay, you have 80% chances of benefiting from a drug, which means that whatever we do in pharma, okay, is a bad competition with nature for cases that are around the normal. But the very, very, very rare, nature didn't encounter it. So let's focus on the very rare. Till the following hit me. What hit me? The problem is that 1 sigma, all right, is 5 times more frequent than 4 sigmas. 5,000 times, not 5,000, 5,000 times more frequent than, okay. If you're pharma, who would you try to cure? The 4 sigma? They're going to die anyway, all right? You see? Or the 1 sigma, the 5,000 times more, the 1 sigma. So therefore, all this, that's where they find their clients. So we reclassify people who are 1 sigma as pre-something, pre-high cholesterol, hypertensive, pre-hypertensive, pre-diabetic, all this, all right? Okay, so this is so the chapter, you know, same convexity, same everything. And this is the same graph, Now I'm going to show you this graph, and it's exactly the opposite when we talk about venture capital. This is a bank. They make small money, and then they lose big. You agree? Well, it's the same thing when you take, there's no drug we have taken in history that did not give us this at some point. You take steroids, you think unconditional gain, look what happens. And when you're mildly ill, any treatment will have this shape. When you're very ill, it's the opposite shape, because you have a lot to gain. If you have cancer, anything you give me, all right? So as a result, we should overtreat the very ill, and we don't. It's not good, place for resources. Pharma makes money on a mildly ill. That's where our money goes, smoothing out lives, and And in it, I talk about via negativa, something very interesting. If you like variation, now replace temperature with calories. 2,400 calories, I was supposed to, 4,000 calories one day and whatever the other day, all right? 800 calories, all right? This is how we're made out to be. The randomness of nature never gave us calories steadily. But actually, it's more complicated than that. I discovered one thing when I started reading papers in medicine about 7 years ago. Everybody in my family is diabetic, all right? Everybody but me. So I realized, how can I pull out of it, all right? Everyone, my ancestors, my grandfathers, they all died younger than I was now, except my grandfather. So you realize that, you have, you understand how sort of like you worry about it. And I realized the following. When people talk about diet and stuff like that, they don't realize that the second order effect matters a lot more than first order effect in some cases. You see? It's not what you eat, it's how, is the second order distribution. Just like temperature for the grandmother. Okay? The average 70 degrees isn't as relevant as what was the variance around that average. And if she spent half the time at 0 degrees, half the time at 140 degrees, information is vastly more important than the average, you see? Second order swamps first order. Can you hear me well? All right. So when you think of diabetes, you realize that a lot of it comes from not overfeeding, but it was not studied. There's very little studies on something here called Jensens Inequality. Are you guys familiar with Jensens Inequality? Okay. So take a function, all right? Function, all right, the temperature, the F is the health of a grandmother. At 0 degrees plus 140 degrees divided by 2, all right? Or function at 0 degrees plus function at 140 degrees divided by 2. There's a difference between two of them, no? It's called the expectation of an average is different from the average of the expectation. It is a minor point, but it captures the second order effect. So pretty much the theme of my book is Jensens Inequality, all right? The problem is if you don't take that, if you like randomness, then there's a difference between the left and the right side. If you hate randomness, the difference is big, but the other opposite direction. So it looks like we are made for randomness in feeding. Who understood it? Religions. Religions understood it. Okay, when people talk about the Cretan diet, okay, they say, okay, let's eat what the Cretans eat. You know what the Cretans eat? Very simple. They have 200 days of fast. I'm Greek Orthodox, all right? Up to 200 days of harrying vegan fast, and then days where they only eat fatty lamb. You see? That's the important thing. The other one is they don't eat 3 meals a day. You know that 3 meals a day, that's a cereal industry. We are antifragile, we starve. Think about it, we are a combination of cow, we're omnivores. We're like a cow at a time, opportunistically, and opportunistically meat eaters, you agree? Okay. Now, how often does a cow eat? All the time. Very good. So there's no randomness when you're getting herbs and whatever, all this boring stuff. You agree? All right. But how often does a lion eat meat? Rarely. And then, okay, does he eat breakfast to go hunt? No, he hunts to get breakfast. Okay, so their eyesight improves. So that's Jensens Inequality. So we started looking with a bunch of friends, and we started meeting in Brussels now, of all places, where they have French fries, by the way, okay, to try to look at where there's something, a metric we call Bregman divergence, where people in medicine didn't get that point. There's only one place in medicine that used that notion of Jensens Inequality, is in pulmonary ventilators. So I have a chapter explaining, this. And to be quick before my time is up, there's another thing that people don't understand, that pharma is never going to make money stressing your body by removing food from you, making you eat episodically, and putting you, say, 6 weeks at 600 calories, you lose diabetes. There's institutes in Siberia that have been doing it for 100 years, you see. Pharma isn't going to make money removing. This is what I call via negativa. In a complex system, if you remove something unnatural from it, okay, you have no long-term side effects. But if you inject something new, you don't know the chain of unintended consequences. This is what I call via negativa. So this book is philosophical about decision-making by the negative. Stop people from smoking, you save, it's better than any drug developed. But nobody's going to make money if you stop people from smoking. So the emphasis is on adding, you see. Same with diabetes drugs. Stop people from eating breakfast, dinner, 1 meal a day like the Romans or the Cretans, and make them follow some fasting protocol, like religions try to establish fasting. So this is my book. Now, the last book is on ethics. It so happens that ethics can be mapped exactly as the bankers makes bonuses, taxpayer pays for it. Some people have the upside, others have the downside. You agree? Well, he is short an option that someone else is being harmed by, and he's collecting the premium. So you can look at ethics as I'm harming others. And in my writing, I adopt the following. There's a person I collaborate with at Max Planck in Berlin, Professor Gigranzer, and he said very simple, if you ask a doctor what he should be doing, he gives you a different answer from if you ask him what he would be doing for you. Okay? So and it's very simple. I never tell you what you should be doing. I tell you what I do. I will never make a prediction unless I have something at harm. It's called skin in the game. You see, if I'm harmed, I want to be harmed first, by my opinion, okay? So start looking at transfer of fragility, you see. Why did the economic establishment continue to develop these bogus models? Because they're not harmed by the error. Someone else eats the error, they make their salary, someone else eats the error, you see. So here we have 3 categories of people. People calibrated ethically, skin in the game. People who are not calibrated ethically, they have the upside, other people have downside. Like a bureaucrat who harms you, he makes a policy mistake. You pay the price, he doesn't. Okay? This is why big centralized states don't have the corrective mechanism of municipalities. Okay? And then finally, there's a category of heroes who have soul in the game. Firefighters, they have all the downside to give you the upside. You see? You get the upside, they take all the downside. And they don't get a bonus. At no time in history have we had more people in power who don't come from the third category. Remember, even 1 generation ago of presidents, George Bush, the father, he was a war hero, all right? George Washington, Hannibal was first in battle, wanted to be first, okay? Churchill he of course crossed the Atlantic, chased by the Germans, and he couldn't care less. But you see the idea of it, the idea of skin in the game as a corrective mechanism, and comes back to Hammurabi's law, is that risk in the system increases. There's no inspector who will ever know more than a person who has skin in the game. So Fat Tony has a rule, never get on a plane unless the pilot is on board, and make sure there's a co-pilot. That sort of thing. And also, never ask anyone for to give his projection. Ask him what he has in his portfolio. So I made a lot of enemies with this, and I will continue to make enemies, but you also make friends. The idea is ethical commitment has to be all the way through, all right? So that was the idea. So I went on CNBC and put it on a show. They say, you have to give us a prediction. I say, no, I'll give you my portfolio without hiding the scale, give you the percentages. And then I said, okay, no, it doesn't work. It's not sexy for, they want people to sell fake projections. So this is sort of like the book. And now we can start the Q&A. And we start with this, with the entrepreneurship, no? So thank you for listening to me. And so I guess the first question was precisely about implication for your business, okay, along these lines, well, it's having the opposite payoff, failing fast. If you have optionality, you'd rather have 5 options. The biggest mistake is long-term planning because it locks you up like a highway without exits. So, and mathematically, 5 resetting options are worth a lot more than 1 long 5-year option. You see, because you opportunistically have time to change. You can accept or not. So this is one of the conclusions that Ken Griffin has identified, which I'm sure is the one he liked the most. And there are other ones like that you know, the other ones. But if you phrase it, I'm not contributing anything particularly intelligent to that debate, other than framing it in the mathematics of this, in a coherent mathematical framework for all of this, you see. And if you frame everything in a coherent mathematical framework, then you can make immediate recommendation that if you have optionality, then you're gain from randomness, okay? Then you have maximum exposure. Then a 5-year option is less worse than 5 times 1-year option reset every year, you see? That don't have long-term plans, counter intuitively and stuff like that. So that answers your question.
Yes.
See, all right. So another final thing, you know, for entrepreneurship is that failing fast for you guys, you understand the value of failing fast, you see? Because you understand that if you have less harm, that okay, this is the only place where people know how to fail fast. I mean, this part of the world. So another question? Yes.
On your second chapter regarding evolution, you mentioned that, like for example, I think ancient Romans used to throw away the weak kids into the pits, I think, saying...
Is it ancient Romans?
Eliminate the weaker kids, the weak child.
Yeah, what I'm saying is okay, evolution is harsh, all right? There's something called naturalistic fallacy that we have to fight. We have to use all what's good about evolution, all right, while imposing our moral standards. And how do you do it?
How does that
I mean, okay.
Darwinism?
Darwinism, okay, by wanting to have a society that has no Darwinism, we weakened it further, so everybody's got to sink together. The way you got to do it is protect the very weak. And this is what I call the barbell approach. I haven't spoken about it now. When you see barbell approach is, instead of having the middle class being favored, favor the very, very weak and let the wild entrepreneur prevail, you see? The middle class, they want their comfortable thing, you see. So the barbell approach is like for a portfolio, okay? Hedge your extreme risk, you see? Hedge your extreme negative risk and take maximal positive risk. See, that's the barbell approach you can apply to society. It's a little complicated to do it here, but the barbell means instead of having a middle policy to smooth out fluctuation, just try to smooth out fluctuation very unhappy. Another way to practice in medicine, when I say have more people in emergency rooms and fewer elective surgeries. That's my form of, my answer. Protect people from extreme unhappiness, but don't give them Prozac because they have mood swings. You get the idea? Yes, him and then, yes.
I've got a question about figuring out whether a model or a system is fragile. So I guess it's easy in cases, the question's about picking what the stressor is that you're looking at.
That's excellent.
So in a case where you're long an option, it's easy to know, but if you're picking a company, how do you know, is it sales or what?
Okay. When I take a model, I take a look at economic models. It's very simple. I take every model as it is. People usually never miss a relevant variable to their model. In fact, they have too many, you see. Model error typically doesn't come from misidentifying, what enters your model. Like you have a company and then you have sales, the weather in Spain, all these you have them in your model. The problem is that making a point estimate of that variable rather than a variable estimate of that variable. You see the idea? Like, for example, the big error, you know that your grandmother, in the grandmother example, is affected by the weather. But a point estimate is you take the average temperature, 70 degrees, instead of stochasticizing the average. And this is the test for that, I call it the omega A. The omega A test is you take a model For example, I have projections of sales 10 years from now. Okay, maybe I'm very good at it, but they're random. Instead of doing that, I test my model across different values of that. If I'm concave to that, then I have model error. Just as I said earlier, very simple. Take you sell fertilizers, all right? You're very good at estimating orders for fertilizer over the next year. So on average, you're going to get 10 million orders, no? To see how vulnerable you are to model error, you try to see at 8 million fertilizers or at 12 million fertilizers, you see? To see if you lose a lot more at 8 million than you gain at 12 million, you have a huge exposure to model error, you see? You take the model is composed of variables f of A1, A2, A3, A3, and you check every variable to see if you're concave to it as a first cut. There's a more complicated method where you move them together, but the way we did it for the IMF, I wrote a paper, a heuristic to detect model error, that was so simple that even the IMF people understood it, all right? And then, it took only a year to get stamp of approval to tell you how easy it was. It has to be very easy. I work for free for the IMF for a simple reason, because they said, oh, we're forced to pay you, and then they sent me 83 pages to sign. And I resigned right away before starting. So we negotiated. I don't earn a salary, and I only had to sign a few sheets and stuff like that, the IMF. And then we wrote the paper. By the time to put the approval, all right, it took about a year, all right? But the idea is very simple. I take a bank. No bank, misses the linear. You see the variations right away, you see? So it has to be nonlinear. So you take a bank, you do a stress test. I don't care how you do it, all right? Because I tell you, this important is not the precision of your stress test, it's the acceleration, okay? So I say, okay, the stock market is going to go down 30%. How much do you lose, okay? Then you do stock market going down 35% and going down 40%. If you have accelerated losses, you see, it means that you have model error. You see, that's how you test for model error. And then you test the antifragile has opposite characteristics. You make more and more. You see, you make a lot more if the market goes up 20%. More than twice than if the market goes up 10%, you're antifragile. And then you have, the sky's the limit. Yes. Sorry, he was first, and then you.
I was curious, based on all these principles, what does your portfolio look like?
Now, unfortunately, because of this book tour and because I retired as a trader, I spent my life as a trader under one simple thing, doing the opposite of this, okay, trying to survive by selling volatility and buying tails. So it started in 87, so I had a bit bonus from the market from 87. And I realized looking at 87 that if you have a 20 sigma event, okay, 20 sigma, you're so convex that you can hold, and I wrote a paper, it's on the site, showing why it's so disproportionate that you can wait 400 years, all right, and before having another one, you're still okay, all right? It's very convex. So I told myself I only specialize in extreme tails. So that was my profession. I did that. And of course, you wait 3, 4, 5 years. Everybody tells you you're an idiot, you're not profitable, and so on. They say, okay, all right, and then they disappear, they blow up. So that was my how I have built my portfolio. Now that I have it, I'm lazy. I don't want to lose it. All right. So unlike Seneca, I can't wake up in the morning till I'm in a shipwreck. All right. So I can't do that. So I have inflation hedges 85% of my portfolio, including land in Lebanon. I'm trying to buy stuff in Canada, some stocks, stuff like that, all right? Real estate, you can lend. This is my portfolio. I had gold and silver. I've decreased it after the crisis. But now my portfolio doesn't correspond to how I built it. So it's an unfair question, you see. I'm now a retired person who writes books and doesn't want variation. And I do a deal with God, tell him, 20 years from now, give me back 90% of my money unharmed by inflation, and I sign off right away. You see, I give 10% to have that hedge, and I can't find, there's no answer, and I can't find anybody, to give me, that kind of package. You see, so this is my portfolio, and then him, yes.
So we actually traded back and forth a little bit. I'm Nick Mallett.
So it was very strange. I got on Twitter about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, well,
So
it's popular.
Sorry.
So one of the things that was brought up recently in the Enterprise Architecture Forum was a discussion of business strategy and how to apply to anti-fragility. And should we view it now, business strategy, not an investment strategy, but what do we do with the product or what do we do with the market? Is the strategy itself fragile or anti-fragile, or is the system of executing on the strategy and thereby improving it fragile or anti-fragile?
I'm going to give you a simpler question. You see, if you've noticed, I have no theory so far. I've produced no theory. All I've produced is measurements. Have you noticed? Okay, we can do measurements. If a business is fragile, measurement. Describe a business. What do they do for a living?
Oh, well, so we can just use Microsoft for fun because we're all here. Let's pick a particular area of Microsoft's business. So the Windows business is sold through OEMs.
Okay, so you have Windows sales, you have sales, and you have costs, all right? No? Okay, so you take sales in different divisions, and you see what happens to your business. As sales go up by 1 mean deviation, go down by 1 mean deviation, or 2 mean deviations to be more robust, okay? And then if the costs go up or down, you see? And you look at the net because you may not be able to keep your cost and see what happens to your business. So you see how fragile you are. I'm certain you are fragile for one simple reason. You can't be very big, pretty much that. Given you sort of dominate the business, when you grow, the growth, everything in nature has this shape, by the way. You know that, all right? Everything in nature has this shape. So you are fragile probably going down from here, but you're getting paid for the fragility. The point is you want to know how much you are paid for the fragility. It's a little more, you see the idea. Everything in nature has this shape. You see? There's a maximum once you're anti-fragile to source, and then at some point it tapers off and then becomes, then now you're fragile, you see? Because going back down, you get the idea. Which is as a price of success. That's Damocles' sword. So you want to manage it either by exiting the main business and going into like what sort of Google's doing, go into areas that are not, nobody's dominating, you see? So because, if you have search engine used by 80% of the people, right, you're going to shoot for 85%? No, you want to go for, you get the idea. So you want to go for something that, that you can dominate. That's sort of the strategy. But you're fragile in a business that you dominate. That definitely It's the point is, are you paid enough for it? You see, that's the point. If I don't mind selling volatility if I'm paid for it. You see the idea. But I'm not a business consultant. But I would say, if someone tells me how do you build a business, I say maximum optionality at all times. Maximum convexity at all times. Now you have minimum convexity, but you're paid for it because you dominate that business. Okay? And you can lose it not because of a competitor, but because the business may mutate into something else. So this is why, you gotta keep seeding those tinkering ventures.
This is where you make the point that as the information content and the offering goes up, you get this, you talk about Bill Gates and he wins and everybody else loses, or Apple wins and everybody else loses. As information content goes up, it gets more fragile or brittle in some sense.
Yeah, okay. The overall environment is very fragile for one simple reason. We're dominant with the power law distribution has one characteristic. I just did coming on a plane to relax from, you have to realize this is my 21st day on the road with, with mails, and you get the idea, or a journalist, and this is the only relaxing lecture I've given other than the one I gave in the university, all right? So relaxing because you're going to get technical right away without the bullshit. Sorry, that goes away. So I just did a very simple, I had book sales, Nielsen book sales for all editions for some, so I processed them. And it's always mind-bogglingly shocking that you have 0.1% of the books represent 50% of the profits. You get the idea? That's, and then we're moving into that environment. We didn't have that before. We didn't have the Harry Potter effect before. Microsoft would have been impossible for someone who drops out of college to reach that monopoly in so short period of time, unless you had in an environment in which there was no connectivity, you see? An environment that was not technological. You see, it was so we're entering a world where things can happen very fast either direction. You see, like the Google came, their babies 10 years ago, you see. So you have, at the same time, you have to take with it that necessarily this thing can shift to something else. So when you look at books also, it's quite shocking, take history, and then you see books that dominated the planet disappeared completely. Like you go they're selling, I'm seeing, look at the sales, 7 copies a week from something that was sells 50, 60 million copies, right? 7 copies. It's shocking how things can shift the other way. This to me is a nice equalizer, but I don't want to depend on huge success. You want to have a steady base. How do you do it? I don't know, right? I mean, you manage your own way. I have no more time.
Questions, so we have time for book signing. Thank you so much.
No more questions. All right, thank you for listening to me, and nice seeing you guys.